Hello guys, it's Gus here from Kojiri once again. In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at Python list. So list in Python is an ordered container. And so what a list stores is that it can store integers, it can store different data types, string text. So let's look at an example. So I'm going to create a list and call it my list, and then I'm going to store the string text in it. So this is an example of a list in Python, and we can print out this list by saying print, and then we input the name of the list, and then when you run the code you will see that the list will be printed out as the result of what we have here. And so when you hit on the run button, you can now see the list items have been printed out as 1, 4, and 5. And so to create a list in Python, we use the square brackets, and then you input any data type. You can either put in your string data type or integer or a boolean or a floating point number. And so let's create this list with multiple different data types. So I'm going to create another item in the list. And so in a list has items that can be stored in it. So this list contains 4 different items, and each of the items can be either a string or an integer or a floating point number, as the case may be. And so in this case, I'm going to have a list with different data types that can be stored in it. And when you run this list, you see that it will print out the items listed in the list. So this list contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items, and each of these items can be indexed using a number. So the index number starts from 0, and so the list item 1 will take the index number 0, the item 4, which is a string, will take the index number 1, fish will take the index number 2, number 290 will take the index number 3, the boolean 3 the boolean true will take the index number 4, float 2.89 will take the index number 5, and the last item in the list false will take the index number 6, and so on and so forth. And so why numbering it starts from 0, and we can print each item in a list by inputting the name of the list, and then in between square brackets we impute the index number. So the index number of fish is 2. So if you want to print fish out, type in 2, and then when you hit on the run button, you see that it will be printed out to the screen. As you can see, fish has been printed out separately as it has the index number 2. Likewise, you can also do the same for different items in the list. And so we are going to run this code again. So you can see that fish has been printed with the index number 2, the boolean true with the index number 4, and the string text 1 with the index number 0. So we can also print out negative index of items. So for example, to print out the negative index of -1, -1 is the last item on the list. So let's print out the last item on the list, which is -1. And when you run the code, you see that -1 will be printed out the console as first. And also you can also print out the next index after -1, which is -2. So to do that, we impute -2, and then the float 2.89 will be printed out to the console screen. And as you can see, 2.89 has been printed because it has the negative index of -2. So next, we are going to be looking at how to get a range of indexes. So for example, if we want to get only three particular items from this list, which is my list, if we want to get only three of the items, say from the items with index number 1 down to index number 4, all we have to do is to separate the items with a semicolon. So to do just that, we impute the first index, which is 1, and then use a colon, not a semicolon. So for example, so now we are going to be looking at how to get a range of indexes. If for example, you want to print out the item 4 down to the boolean true. So what you do is that you use a semicolon to specify from the first item you want to print, which has the index number 1, down to the last item, which has the index number 5. So you're going to count 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So to include the boolean true, you have to increase the number to 5, because the last index number will not be printed out. The last range will not be printed out. So only the second to the last will be printed out. So you're going to put in 1 colon 5. And what this signifies is that it will print from index number 1 down to 4 without including the last item with index number 5. So let's run this code and we get a better understanding. As you can see, it has printed out 4 items, which signifies that it starts from the string 4, fish 290, and the boolean true. And this is what it will print out to the screen. And so for example, if you want to include the float 2.89, what you have to do is to increase the last range, and then you make it 6, and then it will now print from the items with index number 1 to 5. And so you hit the run button, and you can see that it has printed out 4 items, 5 items in the list. So take for example, you only want to print out the items from index number 1 down to the last. All you have to do is to remove the last index, and then you put in the first index you want to print from, down to print down to the last. And so we are going to do just that. And then when you run the code, you see that it will print from the first index down to the final item in the list. And take for example, you also want to print only from the first index, suppose, to the middle item. So all you have to do is to use a colon, and then say you want to stop at fish, so you impute the number 2, and then in this case the range will include the last item. And so when you run the code, you see that it will print down to 4. So if you want to add up the item fish, you increase the range to 3, and then when you run the code, it will print out fish as. So take for example, say you want to print out only from the first item down to the third item. So what you have to do is to impute a semicolon before the colon before the number. So if you want to print out fish, you impute the number 3, and then it will print out from the item 1 down to fish. And then when you run the code, you see that it will print out the 3 items in the list beginning from index number 0, 1, and 2. And so next we are going to see how we can add items to a list. Now to add item to a list, all you have to do is to use the append method, and then you can add any item at all to a list. And so to do that, first of all, we start by typing the name of the list, and then type in append dot append, then you, in between parentheses, you either impute any of the data types. It can be string or a number. And so when you hit the run, you can see that add will be added to the list items here. And so what you do now is to print out the list. You are going to say print my list, and then when you run the code, you see that add will be added to the list, and you can see it as the last item here in the list. So take for example, you want to add the number to a specified index. Say for example, you want to add it to the index number 2. So all you have to do, we are going to use the method called insert, and then you specify the index number where you want to add it. And so I'm going to say my list dot insert, and then you first of all impute the index number where you want to add it. and then you separate it with a comma, and then you now input the data type, either a string or a number. And then when you run the code, you see that the string new will be inserted for the index number 2. So let's run the code. So now we're going to print out our list, and then when you run the code, you see that new will be inserted as the index number 2. So likewise, you can also add an integer or a float. So after the index number, when you want to add it, you now input the data type that you want to insert, and then when you run this code, you will see that it will be inserted in the list, and you can see that the floating number 3.142 has been inserted at the index number 2. So we can also delete items from a list. To delete items from the list, we use the pop method. So you specify the name of the list, and then you use the pop method. So you're going to say the name of the list, my list dot pop, and then you specify where you want to delete the item or not. You can choose to do that. So and so the pop will remove the last item in the list. And so when you run the code, you see that the last item in this list, which is false, will be removed. And so when you hit on the run button, you can see that false has been removed. And so you can also specify a particular index which you want to remove. So I want to remove the index number 2 item with the index number 2. And so when you hit on the run button, see that the item with the index number 2 will be removed. And so you can see that 14290 has been printed out, and the index number 2, which is fish, has been removed from the list of items. Now, another way of removing items from the list is to use the remove method. And so instead of typing in pop, you can also use the remove, which is REMOVE, and then you can specify the item directly in the list with the name. So if you want to remove the string fish, so you type in the string as it is in the list fish, and then let's run this code to see. And then let's run this code to see. And then when you hit on the play button, you'll see that the fish has been removed. And also, you can also remove an integer in the list. So let's remove the integer 290. And then when you hit on the run button, you'll see that the integer 290 has been removed as the items in the list. As you can see, 1 4 fish through 289, 2.89, and false has been printed out as the items in that list. And also to delete a specified index, we use the del keyword to delete a specified item in the list. And so to do that, you put in the name of the list and then del. So in this case, and so to delete an item from a list, we use the del keyword. And so instead of using remove, we type in del and then the name of the list and the specified index number in square brackets, and then say I want to remove the item with index number 4. You see that it will delete the item with index number 4, and when you run this code, you now see that the index number 4 item, which is true, will not be printed out to the Python console. And so that's how you can delete the item in the list. You can also use the negative index to delete the item in the list. So the item with index number 4, minus 1, minus 2, minus 2, minus 1, which is 290, will be removed from the list as the list of items. And so you can see that the integer 290 is not found as the members of that list. And so a good use of this list is when you are using, suppose you are creating a username and a password, and suppose the user has stored some information and you want to remove it. This way you can use the delete keyword. Suppose the user wants to add more information. Suppose, example, in your application, you can use the append to add items to your list in a user account where a user has the details of his account name and then he wants to add or change a name. You can use the list to delete or append or insert new items in that list. And so next we are going to be looking at how to get the length of a list. So if you want to get the length of a list, what you're going to do, and so to get the length of a list, what we are going to do is to print the length together with the list. So we use the len method, and so in this case we are going to print len together with the name of the list. And so you type in len, and this is telling the Python console that you want to print out the length of the list, and then you input the name of that list, which is my list. And so when you run this code, you will see that it will print out the length of the number of items in this list. And so hit on the run button, and you can see that this list contains 7 items. So let's count 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 items are contained in this list. And so next we are going to be seeing how we can change an item in the list. So change an item in the list, we have to access the index of that item before we can use the assignment operator to change the item. So to change the item of a list, we include the name of the list, say my list, and then we specify an index number 4, and then use the equal to sign, and then specify what exactly you want to put. So let's take the index number 4. It contains a boolean called true. So for example, if you want to change it to, let's say, an integer 0, and you see that when you run this code, the true will be changed from the boolean to an integer. And so let's hit on the run button, and so let's print out this list, my list. And then when you hit on the run button, you will see that integer 0 will be used to replace the boolean true, as the case may be. So you can also add up strings or floating point number. And so when you hit on the run button, you will see that null will be added at the index number 4. So that's how we can change the items in the list. So we can also check if an item exists in a list, and to do that, we use the in operator. So what you are going to do is to print, and then you specify the item that you want to check if it exists in that list. So if you want to check if 290 exists in the list, type in 290 and then the operator in, then you type in the name of your list, my list, and then you're going to run this code. And so when you run this code, you will see that it will return true because 290 is found in this list. And when you print it, you can see that true is returned because 290 is found in the list. So take for example, you want to check if 29 is found in the list. So you type 29 and you type 29 and you hit on run. Because every time when I boy, don't change this thing. That's a we can't talk with that. Okay, so now you want me to say, so you can see that false has been printed out because 29 is not found in the list. And so that's how you can check if an item exists. You can also check if a string really exists in your list. So let's type in 1 and then let's run the code to see if it actually exists. And you can see that it returns true because 1 is found in the list. And so we are going to see how we can extend a list, and by doing that we use the extend method. So we are going to create two lists and then see how we can extend the list. So I'm going to create a list and call it list2, and then assign items in the list. And so these are two different lists that we have here. And so we're going to extend the list using the norm method. And what you do is type in the first list name, and which is my list, and then you type in dot extend, and then you input the name of the list which you want to extend it to. So in this case, it is 2, and you will see that list 1 and list 2 will be extended together. So we are going to print out the first list, which is my list. And so this shows that my list has been extended to include the items in list number 2. So when we run the list, so when we run the code, you see that my list will be printed out to include both list 2. And so when you hit on the run button, you will see that my list has been extended and it now includes mango, yam, and the integer 24. So that's how we extend lists in Python. And so next, we are going to be looping through a list. And so to look through a list is to access all the items basically one by one. And so to look through a list, what you have to do is to use the for loops and look through a list. So to do that, we type in for, take for example, we want to loop through the list, my list. So you specify any variable, say for x in, then you now type in the name of the list, my list, then put a colon, then hit enter, then you now print the value of x. And so what this basically means that it takes x to represent one of each of the items in this list instead of printing my list. So x basically represents the item with the index number 0 down to the last item. So you can now print all the items one by one. And so it's not only bound to use x, you can also use for items whatever word you want to use. You can say for items in my list, then you can now print items. And then so when you run the code, you see that each item in the list will be printed out. So it's not a compulsory requirement that you use only x. So depending on your list or depending on what you are doing, if your list is a food, you can say for foods in my list, print food, and as the case may be, you can do use any you can use any alphabet to represent each of the items. So whether it be X or Y or Z or A or a number or a word, you can use it to represent items in your list. So let's run an example to see. So it's not a compulsory must that you must use only X. You can use any other word or string or alphabet for representing items in the list. So this is how we can look through a list and then print out the items one by one. So finally, we are going to be looking at another way to create a list. So another way to create a list is to use a literal. And so we are going to be looking at an example of that. So we use the list constructor to construct a list. So So take for example, I want to create another list. So without using the square brackets, all you have to do is to use the list constructor by saying list and specify, and then we can now specify the items that will be stored in the list. And so this is another way of creating a list. So you have to take note of the double brackets, and then we can now print my list. And so when you run this code, you see that this will print out the list items. And so these are the items in the list. So this is another way in which you can create lists in Python. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Please, if you do, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications. And if you have any questions to ask, you can drop your questions in the comment section and I will reply you and give you more explanation. If you have any contribution, you can drop any of your contributions there and share the video to your friends, share to others to help them understand about list in Python programming. So in our next tutorial, I'm going to be talking about Python tuples. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Have a wonderful day.